Nathan Caldwell, heir to a financial empire, stepped off the ferry in Capri, carrying a heart heavy with uncertainty and a longing for freedom. The island stretched before him like a world apart, crystal clear waters shimmering under the golden sun, narrow cobblestone streets winding around whitewashed houses, and bursts of bougainvillea spilling over balconies. To most, Capri was paradise, but to Nathan, it was an escape. Born into a billionaire family, Nathan had spent his entire life being groomed to take over the Caldwell empire, where power and profit always came first. But deep down, all he ever wanted was music. Playing the piano was the only place he ever felt truly himself. However, when his father arranged for him to marry the daughter of another wealthy family, a business deal disguised as a wedding, Nathan made the boldest decision of his life. He ran. Now, stepping onto the island with nothing but a small suitcase and no clear plan, he had no idea what the future held. But one thing was certain: he wasn't going back. Nathan rented a small room at a seaside guest house, a stark contrast to the lavish estates he had once called home. The room was modest, but when he opened the window, the vast expanse of the deep blue sea stretched endlessly before him. The salty breeze carried the scent of citrus and the rhythmic crash of waves against the cliffs, a serenity he had never known. He spent the afternoon wandering through Capri's narrow alleyways, absorbing the slow, unhurried rhythm of the island. Gone were the tailored suits and the suffocating expectations of high society. Now, he was just a man in a linen shirt and jeans, blending into the crowd. He passed by small boutiques, quaint roadside cafes, and locals engaged in soft, melodic conversations in Italian. Then he saw it, a small cafe tucked between two ivy-covered buildings. A wooden sign hanging above the entrance read, "Il Piccolo Refugio." Pushing the door open, he was immediately enveloped in the rich aroma of freshly brewed coffee mingling with the scent of old paper. Towering bookshelves lined the walls, filled with novels and poetry collections. This wasn't just a cafe, it was a sanctuary for book lovers, a quiet refuge for wandering souls. And then he saw her. Elena Russo glanced up as the door chime rang, her dark eyes briefly meeting Nathan's. There was something about her that made him pause, an effortless confidence, a quiet strength. She wore a simple sundress, her dark curls pinned loosely at her nape, and a dusting of flowers still clung to her fingertips. "Buongiorno," she greeted, her voice smooth and warm. "Morning," he replied, realizing he had been staring. He cleared his throat. "This place, it's incredible." Elena smiled, setting a ceramic cup onto the counter. "It was my mother's dream, a place where people could escape into stories over a good cup of coffee." He hesitated before asking, "And now it's yours?" Her gaze softened. "Now it's home." Nathan felt something shift inside him. He had spent his entire life surrounded by luxury, yet he had never known a place that felt like home. He lingered longer than necessary, ordering an espresso he didn't really need, just to hear her voice a little longer. In the days that followed, Nathan found himself returning to Il Piccolo Refugio over and over again. At first, he told himself it was just for the coffee. A well-made espresso was hard to come by. Then he convinced himself that the cafe was the perfect quiet spot to write music. But deep down, he knew the truth. It wasn't the coffee, it wasn't the atmosphere, it was Elena. She was unlike anyone he had ever met. The women in his old world wore designer dresses and spoke in carefully measured words, as if every syllable had been calculated for effect. But Elena was effortless. She wasn't trying to impress anyone, and that, in itself, was captivating. Nathan listened as she spoke about her mother, a strong woman who had built this cafe with love and determination, about how she had always dreamed of leaving Capri one day, of seeing Paris, London, or anywhere beyond the shores of this tiny island. One late afternoon, as they sat on the small balcony of the cafe, Nathan finally asked, "Why haven't you ever left?" Elena turned her coffee cup slowly in her hands, her gaze drifting toward the sea. "Because this place, it's not just a cafe or a library. It's my mother's heart. If I sell it, I'll lose her all over again." Her words struck something deep within him. He had spent his whole life surrounded by luxury, Yet he had never had a place that felt like home. But Elena was tethered here, not by obligation, but by love. And at that moment, he knew one thing for certain: he never wanted to leave her. That afternoon, after closing the cafe, Elena invited Nathan for a walk along the shore. The sun was setting, painting the sky in soft shades of orange and purple, its golden light shimmering on the calm waves. They walked side by side, the sand cool beneath their feet, the rhythmic crash of the tide filling the silence between them. After a few moments, Elena glanced at him, her voice gentle yet curious. "Why did you come here, Nathan? Who are you, really?" Nathan hesitated for a brief moment, his gaze fixed on the horizon. He could hear the steady pulse of the waves, feel the weight of her question pressing against him. A dozen answers formed in his mind, but none of them felt right. Instead, he exhaled slowly and remained silent. Elena didn't press him for an answer. She simply nodded, accepting his silence, and continued walking beside him. They didn't need words. There was something unspoken between them, something fragile yet comforting. As the last light of the sun dipped below the horizon, they stood together in quiet understanding. For now, the moment was enough. The next morning, as Nathan sipped his espresso on the balcony of his guest house, his phone buzzed. A flood of messages from his assistant filled the screen. "Nathan, they found you. Your father is sending people to Capri to bring you back." His heart clenched. He had always known this moment would come, but he wasn't ready. Not now, not when he had finally found a place he didn't want to leave. That evening, Nathan went to see Elena. She was stacking books on the shelf when he walked in, her face lighting up at the sight of him, though curiosity flickered in her gaze. "You look unsettled," she noted, setting a book down. "Something wrong?" Nathan took a deep breath. This was it, the moment he had to decide whether to keep running or finally face the truth. "There's something I need to tell you," he said, his voice steady. Elena tilted her head slightly, waiting. "I'm not just some wandering traveler looking for inspiration," he admitted. "I'm Nathan Caldwell. My family owns a massive investment empire, and they've planned my entire life for me, including arranging a marriage to a woman I don't love." Elena blinked, surprise flashing across her face. "So, you ran away?" Nathan nodded. "I couldn't live the life they wanted for me, but now they've found me. They're coming." Silence stretched between them. Elena looked down, then slowly asked, "So, are you leaving?" Nathan shook his head. "No, I don't want to go back, but I also don't want to drag you into this mess." Elena studied him for a long moment before a small, gentle smile touched her lips. "Nathan, I'm not afraid of a mess. I just want to know, what do you really want?" Nathan met her gaze, and for the first time in his life, he knew the answer. "I want to stay. I want to be with you." 2 days later, Nathan left Capri. Not because he wanted to, but because he had to face his father. Before he left, he made a promise to Elena. "I will come back. Just wait for me." Elena said nothing, just held his hand, her eyes filled with trust. When Nathan walked into his father's office in New York, there were no pleasantries exchanged. Mr. Caldwell sat behind his polished mahogany desk, his gaze cold and calculating. "So you finally decided to show up," he said, his voice calm but firm. Nathan took a deep breath. "I'm not here to resume the life you planned for me. I'm here to tell you this. I won't marry the woman you chose. I won't live the life you designed for me." His father arched a brow, folding his arms. "And you think you have a choice?" Nathan nodded, his voice unwavering. "Yes, I'm not a child anymore. If I have to walk away from everything, I will, but I won't walk away from my own life." Silence stretched between them. For the first time, Nathan didn't flinch under his father's gaze. Finally, his father sighed, his sharp features softening just slightly. "You're serious about this?" "Completely." After a long moment, his father gave a slow nod. "Fine. But understand this. Once you leave, there's no coming back." Nathan took a deep breath, feeling lighter than he ever had before. He had spent years living in the shadow of his father's expectations, But standing here now, he realized something. He wasn't afraid anymore. He didn't need the Caldwell name to define him. He didn't need wealth or power. He had found something far more valuable. With quiet certainty, he met his father's gaze and smiled. I won't need to. 2 weeks later, Nathan returned to Capri. This time, he wasn't just escaping, he was coming home. He walked through the familiar streets, inhaling the salty sea breeze mixed with the rich aroma of freshly brewed coffee. But more importantly, he wasn't coming empty-handed. In his grasp was a bouquet of deep red roses, their velvety petals carrying all the emotions he had yet to say. As Nathan stepped into Il Piccolo Refugio, the soft chime of the doorbell rang. Elena was behind the counter, sorting through a stack of books. When she looked up and saw him, her breath hitched, her eyes widening in surprise. "You came back," she whispered, her voice barely steady. Nathan stepped closer, lifting the bouquet with a gentle smile. "I told you I would." Elena reached out, her fingers grazing the petals as if she couldn't quite believe it. "Roses?" she murmured. "They reminded me of you," he admitted. "Strong, graceful, and unforgettable." Elena smiled softly, but there was still hesitation in her eyes. She didn't need grand promises. She needed certainty. In the days that followed, Nathan made sure to show her that he wasn't just passing through this time. He became a familiar presence at Il Piccolo Refugio, helping her organize books, making coffee, and even playing soft piano melodies in the evenings when the cafe quieted down. He learned how she liked her espresso, just a little sweeter than usual. He started leaving small notes tucked between book pages, recommending stories he thought she would love. And when a storm hit the island one evening, knocking out power at the cafe, Nathan stayed, lighting candles and reading poetry aloud to her in the flickering glow. Every moment was his way of telling her, "I'm here, and I'm not leaving." One afternoon, as they walked along the cliffs overlooking the sea, Elena turned to him, her gaze searching. "You really don't plan on leaving this time, do you?" Nathan gently took her hand, squeezing it lightly. "No. I finally know what I want, a life I choose, and that life includes you." Elena studied him for a long moment before a slow smile spread across her lips. "Then let's see where this takes us." There was no rushed proposal, no grand declarations, just two people finding each other again and choosing to walk forward together. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Nathan knew this was just the beginning of their real story. 1 year later, Capri was no longer just a place Nathan had escaped to, it was home. Over the past year, he and Elena had built a life together, one filled with quiet mornings at the cafe, afternoon walks through the cobbled streets, and evenings where Nathan played piano just for her. But tonight was different. Elena stepped onto the beach, her breath catching as she took in the sight before her. Dozens of candles flickered in a perfect circle around a small table draped in white, petals of red roses scattered over the sand. The waves lapped gently at the shore, blending seamlessly with the soft melody of a violin playing in the distance. And there, standing in the candlelight, was Nathan. "Elena," he said, pulling out a chair for her. She sat down, heart pounding. "Nathan, did you do all this?" He simply smiled, taking her hand in his, tracing slow circles over her skin. They shared dinner, reminiscing about their journey together, and as the meal ended, Nathan stood. Slowly, he knelt before her. Elena gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. "This past year has been the happiest of my life," Nathan began, his voice steady but full of emotion. "I've spent so long running, but when I met you, I finally found something I never want to run from. You are my home, Elena Russo. Will you marry me?" Tears glistened in her eyes as she nodded fervently. "Yes, Nathan. 1,000 times yes." He slipped the ring onto her finger, then pulled her into his arms. As their lips met, the stars above seemed to shine even brighter. The sky over Capri was a perfect shade of blue as guests gathered on a stunning clifftop overlooking the endless sea. White silk drapes billowed gently in the breeze, and fresh roses lined the aisle, filling the air with their delicate fragrance. The sound of soft string music blended harmoniously with the crashing waves below, creating the perfect backdrop for a love story that had finally come full circle. Elena walked down the aisle, her heart pounding as she took in the sight of Nathan standing at the altar. He looked breathtaking in a classic black suit, his blue eyes locked onto hers with an intensity that made her breath hitch. But what surprised her the most, what made her eyes shimmer with unshed tears, was the presence of Nathan's parents, seated in the front row. They had come. They had finally accepted him, accepted his choice to live the life he wanted, to love who he wanted. When Elena reached him, Nathan took her hands, squeezing them gently as if to reassure her that this moment was real. The officiant began the ceremony, but to Nathan, the world had faded away. There was only her. When it was time for their vows, Nathan took a deep breath and spoke first. "I spent my entire life running. From expectations, from responsibilities, from a future that never felt like mine. I thought happiness was something distant, something I would find only if I kept searching. But then I found you, and I realized happiness isn't about escaping. It's about choosing where you want to be and who you want to share it with. Elena, you are my home, my peace, my greatest adventure. You make life feel like a song I never want to stop playing. And I vow from this moment forward to always choose you. I vow to love you, to stand beside you, and to build a life that we can be proud of, together." Elena's lips trembled as she fought back tears. Her voice was soft but steady as she responded, "Nathan, you have shown me a love I never dared to dream of. You stayed when you could have left. You fought for us when it would have been easier to let go. I promise to love you, to believe in us, and to walk beside you no matter where life takes us. As long as I have you, I have everything." As they exchanged rings, a soft hush fell over the guests, as if even the wind had paused to witness this moment. "You may kiss the bride," the officiant announced with a warm smile. Nathan didn't hesitate. He pulled Elena into his arms and kissed her, pouring every ounce of love, devotion, and promise into that single moment. The crowd erupted in applause. Rose petals rained down upon them, but for Nathan and Elena, time had stopped. As the music swelled and they turned to face their friends and family as husband and wife, Nathan whispered into her ear, "Forever starts now." And under the Capri sun, surrounded by love and endless possibilities, their new life began.